so I'm going to be talking about customizing Lego parts and minifigures. I'm sure you guys, next slide. I'm sure you guys have seen all of these types of people before. We got Phoenix Customs, Eclipse Graphics, Carmi Customs, Minifig Cat Toys, X39 Custom, Citizen Brick, Brick Arms, Brick Forge, Brick Warriors, Christo, Minifix for You, and Little Arm Shop. I'm sure you're wondering, how did all of these companies get started? Like seriously, like 10 years ago, none of these companies existed. So how did all this start? All right, well, quick background for those of you who don't know who I am. I run a YouTube channel. I think it's got like, I don't know, like 100,000 subscribers now. I'm working on a giant 28 baseplate sheet monk. A little background on me. And then of course, a lot of you know that I run the Minifix for You booth. I've been doing that for 4 years now. Okay, so we're going to talk about how this all kind of started. How did customizing Lego minifigures really get started? Like, what were those ground roots that we started off with? And that was actually decaling and painting, surprisingly. Carmi Customs was actually one of the first decalers for Clone Troopers back in like 2005. It's crazy stuff. And it started off with these two things, and then painting was always a big thing. When I was a younger kid, you know, about like 12, 11 years old, I remember painting customs and stuff like that. So these were the ground roots, and then of course, you know, the purists out there switching Lego parts, that's no fun. So these are the ground roots that all of this kind of started off of, you know, customization and how we can take this from that. Okay, so customizing Lego today is pretty much these 5 things. We have decaling, painting, engraving, UV printing, and pad printing. Now, don't get me wrong, there's actually plenty more than this, but these are the 5 main things that out of those companies use for when, I guess, customizing Lego minifigures and I guess parts as well. And we're going to touch on printing a little later. Engraving's pretty much as it sounds, and then again, I just touched on decaling and painting. And then like companies like Brick Forge, Brick Arms, Brick Warriors, those are 3 off my top of my head. A couple other companies. These are how they're making those molds, and as well as Carmi Customs, those helmet molds you're seeing, all of that. So basically, it's again 3 things. We have plastic injection, resin casting, and 3D printing. Plastic injection is the one that's most used often. 3D printing is usually used for prototyping, but I've seen people perfect that. It's getting the technology for 3D printing is definitely going to be used later on in coming years as it gets better. And then resin casting is more for the one-person type of game of making a small amount of figures because it's just a small cast. Because plastic injection, you know, that this mold you're seeing right here, that titanium that you're using to mold those brick arms, to mold those helmets, to mold those armors, that titanium is thousands of dollars because it has to be, you know, you're sending hot molten plastic into that multiple times. So, you know, it's expensive metal, and that's where a lot of that money goes, and that's why you don't see everybody doing plastic injection. So, the biggest rule out of every single customization company and anybody is keeping it Lego without getting away from this minifigure design or from the Lego parts. You know, there's people who model clay, but whatever they do with that clay, they're usually modeling it over the minifigure. It's very rare to see something other than this. They're always going back to the basic minifigure design. And so that's what we all try to keep, is make sure that it works with Lego and that it's integrated with it. So we're actually going to get on the topic of printing. I'm sure a lot of you heard of custom printing before, and I'm going to actually get really into that because I do know a lot about it for the most part. It's a relatively new thing since, I want to say, 2012. 2011, 2012 got really introduced to the Lego community at conventions and such. Online community, it really took off with it as well. So we'll go ahead and get into that. So printing on Lego, pretty much have two options. There's something called UV printing and there's something called pad printing. I'm sure some of you have heard of this stuff before. UV printing stands for ultraviolet printing. Pad printing is the same type of printing that Lego, the actual company, uses. Now, UV printing has almost the same quality as pad, but pad has a much different look than UV. So they're very different printings, and a lot of people sometimes get them mixed up, so it's important that we distinguish what's what, and that's what I'm going to go into. So UV printing, the definition, this is my definition, so if I'm a little wrong, sorry, is basically using light-based inks because it's being cured, the ink that you're using is being cured by ultraviolet light, is a printer that sprays the design onto the desired object, obviously Lego, and then is immediately cured by that light. Now with pad printing, you have heat abrasive inks, a special machine that uses a rubber stamp-like object, then stamps the design where the ink is laid out. So basically you have a tray of ink with that design embellished with it. The pad will grab onto that design and then come over and print onto the Lego. And it's doing that for every single color. So with UV, you're able to do all of the colors, the entire design in one pass. With pad printing, you're doing every single color a different pass. So there's definitely a lot more work with pad, but there's a different quality that a lot of Lego fans really like from that. So when printing on Lego, there's actually, well, to most customizers, there's 12 possible sides to print and design on a Lego minifigure. There's more, like for example, the inside of the Lego minifigure right here, and you can do the elbows. There's all kinds of different places you can print on the minifigure. If it's open, you can print on it. But these are the common printable sides. So you have the front torso, that's one side. Back torso is one side. The legs are counted as one. This is one giant thing. You have the side leg. Under the arm is actually considered one, as well as this one. You have the two arms. You have 4 sides on the head, and that equals 12 different sides. Now, when designing like a Lego minifigure, usually the type of programs you want to use are vector-based. And what is vector? Vector is basically not using pixels. It's not using that much data, and it's used by programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, and Inkscape. Illustrator is probably the biggest, well known for this. It's basically using, I forget the exact term for it, but it's limitless quality, meaning no matter how much you zoom in or how much you zoom out, that quality of whatever the design is will stay the same, and that's what's key. Because when you're designing a Lego minifigure or printing on it, you want that quality because it's such a tiny little 2-inch figure. You need that quality when you're designing on a 15-inch laptop screen. You need that quality to be able to be zoomed down to that scale and have that same quality that you're seeing when you're designing like this minifigure. So if we get on to the next slide, you'll see an example. This is an example of a custom minifigure that's going to be released by my company, Minifigures for You, in a couple weeks. And this is, its name's Hunter. It's a clone trooper. And what you'll see, what we've done is we've designed each side. We have the side leg, the arm, the front torso, which is again included with the legs and all that. And you'll see we did one head print. And basically this is a rough design. This is what the artist is doing, the graphic designer. It's using Illustrator, Inkscape, pretty much those two programs. You can use Photoshop, but again, Photoshop only uses vector for certain parts of the program. So Illustrator is always recommended for that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into UV printing. Once we've obviously designed this type of minifigure, what's the process of ultraviolet printing? Because I'm sure we all know, we've all seen the behind the scenes of Lego, we've all seen those giant machines printing on Lego, but UV is a whole different game. So it starts with the concept. We start with the, what we're going to base the figure off of. If it's a character from some TV show, we'll try to get as many images from that as possible. And then from there, we'll move on to designing the minifigure. And I especially love to be part of that because I'm imagining that you're taking such a detailed person or whatever you're basing it off of, and you're having to simplify it to the Lego look that many and millions of people know. You have to simplify it like that. And so it's an interesting art process that it takes really skilled graphic artists to do. So there's very few people that can do it right. I've seen tons of people do it, but you have to have the mindset to be able to simplify such a complex object. And then after the design, you get on to ordering the parts. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with BrickLink. That's probably the #1 place that parts come from for these types of businesses who are printing onto Lego. After that, it goes on to prepping the artwork. And what exactly that is okay, so if I'm printing, I don't know, some type of Iron Man armor, right? And that Iron Man armor needs to go on a dark black minifigure. If I'm printing just regular ink, we all know how regular inkjet printers work. You have white paper. There is no white ink in those printers. With the type of printer that UV printers use, you have white ink. White ink is actually laid down then with the color. So there's a whole different process with this type of thing. The same goes with pad printing. Whenever you're printing on dark objects, you usually want to lay down a white pass onto the minifigure, then you put on the actual color of the design. So it's an interesting process, and a lot of people fail to realize that there's actually a lot of work to that. So prepping the artwork means we have to take that design we just saw a couple minutes ago, and we have to convert that to a white design that doesn't, I should say, go off the edges. Because if you're printing white exactly on the color onto the white, you'll notice the white on the edges. So you have to be able to edit the artwork around the minifigure. And then again, it takes more time. So there's a lot of work just in prepping that artwork. And then from there, we go on to prepping the parts. Obviously, there's not blank Lego solely available that easily. So prepping the parts meaning that you have to take Lego's original printing off. There's olive green torso. I know for a fact there is no blank olive green torsos available unless you're going to the Lego factory, which nobody really has access to. So I have to go buy, I don't know, some Chima torsos that are olive green, and I'm having, me and my team, we have to go in and we have to use, it's usually about 2,000 grit sandpaper, so you never notice the difference. We sand off that original printing, and it doesn't even look like the torso is really sanded off at all. So other techniques use Brasso, which is it's basically a metal cleaning thing. That works, but it takes a really long time. It takes just a minute for one torso. So if you're doing like decaling work, painting, Brasso is a great option. But when you're doing multiples of hundreds and thousands of minifigures, like the bigger companies, then usually sanding and other types of chemicals will use for that type of thing. So after that, we go into the test printing phase, meaning that the printer, so we have the design ready, we have the parts ready. You start off with one minifigure, right? So you got to print the one minifigure before you can print the multiples minifigures, because if you don't get the the design correct on that one minifigure, then all your production minifigures will be screwed up and you'll be screwed. And this is the biggest thing, this is the biggest lesson I ever learned. I've been printing for a year and a half now, and I can tell you from personal experience, UV printing, it gets complicated. It's no, put it in the machine, it prints everything, you're done. It's not that easy. You have to do the test printing phase, which is when you do the one minifigure. Once you have, again, we're printing side by side as well. So once you have that one side done, then you can get on to this next step, test copy printing stage. And that's kind of a little understatement. It's a lot of work. Basically, you're having to figure out the math between, because every single design we've ever created is at least a couple millimeters off. And what that does, if we put in the same scale of that design is in between that design when you're doing a whole line of minifigures, because that couple millimeters is off on a new design, that will screw up, because down the line, you'll slowly see the design move off the minifigure, and it looks very bad to customers. So you never want that to happen. So that takes a lot of time. You have to do tons and tons of tests before you get it right. And this is just for one side of that minifigure that we're printing. We have to, if it's a 6-sided minifigure, or if it's a 4-sided minifigure, you have to go in and do that 6 times, 7 times. Usually takes me a couple days to get this done. And then of course, once the measurements are done, once we've done all the testing to see the product looks good, we're ready to do a full production printing batch. And that's what goes on to step 8. Production printing is actually the easiest part because you just throw it in the printer, you got all the numbers right, you throw it in, you can take a break after all that testing. After that, we go to the easiest, well, not sometimes the easiest, it's got caves on it, which is reassembling the figures back to the customers. So, if that all sounded very confusing, the next slide will show you a picture version of it. So, if that all sounded really confusing, there's the concept, we start off with that, there's that design again, we ordering the parts off BrickLink, then we're doing that copy printing, so here's those like copies where we're using tape over the minifigures instead of wasting actual minifigure parts, and then we're going to, I'm sorry, I actually did that the wrong way. We're doing the prepping the artwork, we're doing the prepping the artwork, which is that white I was talking about, and then we're prepping the parts, we're sanding down the Lego. Then we're doing the test printing, which again, a couple millimeters just make the difference on these things. We're going to the test copy printing, which is where you're doing the multiples. And then you come down to the final production printing right here. And then we get on to the reassembling of the figures. You can put the hands back on, putting all the heads on, just getting everything together and seeing your final result. And that's really awesome when that comes together. Okay, so back to pad printing, what's the difference between ultraviolet printing and pad printing? Well, first of all, that whole process I just explained of ultraviolet printing is pretty similar to how complex pad printing can be. It's just about the same, there's a lot of work to it. I personally can't speak on how the exact pad printing process works because I don't have one, but I can tell you Mr. Citizenbrick over there, or Eclipse Graphics can tell you how pad printing and how much work is involved in that, because it's just as much as ultraviolet. So what I have here is laid out the pros and cons between the two types of printing. So with ultraviolet printing, the pros are you can print as many colors as you want at one time, it's decently fast, excellent quality if you know what you're doing, it's textured, meaning that these types of printers, what they can do is you're laying down ink with a machine. And you're laying that down many times, and basically you can lay that ink down to the point where it's three-dimensional texture and stuff, and it gets looking pretty cool. Now the cons to it is the fact that color matching, getting colors to match the Lego colors can be very, very tricky, because the way those types of machines print their colors is very different than how Lego selects their colors from plastic beads and stuff. And then these types of printers, I just have to take a moment and explain how much maintenance is involved when you're working on these types of printers. Like, they're machines, they're full industrial machines, and it's so much work than I ever thought when I went into it, but coming out of it, it's a great experience seeing what I can make out of the thing, but it will break down. You will have to have repair people come out. You will have to fix it yourself. These types of machines are engineered like a complex engine. You have to figure out how it's made so you can fix it. So there's a lot of maintenance to it, and it takes time. It takes time to learn. At least a year for me. I've been printing for a year and a half now, and it took me a full year to really get the quality I wanted from the very beginning. It's not just, you can just print all weekend and figure it out. It's many, 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 many experimental test prints and different figures to figure out how you want your quality of your minifigures. Now with pad printing, the pros are, it's Lego-like because Lego themselves use pad printing. The colors usually match Lego because, again, Lego's using that. And then again, you can get really excellent quality if you're experienced at it. The cons to it are it requires a lot of experience of printing in the printing business. You have to usually go to some type of special school and understand colors and stuff like that. Art design, printing, and all that stuff. So pad printing can get very complex. It takes a good amount of time. Each color has to be printed separately, which is a lot of work. And then again, there's maintenance to these things as well, just as much as the UV. So Eclipse Graphics, I think, says this the best, and he said, let me give you an analogy. It's like saying a nail gun is better than a drill. They both do their jobs great, but they can't do it the others. Pad printing can do things digital printing can't, but it can also do, but it also so happens that digital can do things that pad can't. I think he really said it the best. Now we're going to get on to the art and process of customization. This is the last part of the slide because, again, I specialize in printing, so I can talk about that the most. Painting, decaling, hand modeling, there's amazing people out there that do that type of stuff, and I can't even paint a minifigure that well. So the community out there is plenty of artists that can do that. So decaling on Lego, these are some examples I just threw up on the internet. You may have recognized some of these people. We have Force Awakens guy right here, some really old Clone Army customs. These were made back in 2007, I believe. So decaling's been for a long time, and it's where if you're not willing to put out, a car's worth amount of money for a UV printer or a pad printer, then decaling is a much better option because it has good quality. It's not obviously going to be printing, it's not going to have that look, but it's going to get your minifigure to look the way you want. And the way decals work is almost the same way that printing works. You're still doing the design almost the exact same way as a printer would. You're still having to do that simplicity thing I was talking about earlier. And I did do some decaling when I was younger, and I liked it, but it wasn't where I wanted it to be. It wasn't like production. You couldn't put decals on figures all day, and that's why you don't see these big name companies doing decals, is because it's not a production thing. It's really a hobbyist thing to do. It's not a production thing to do, and I think that's the best way to quote decaling Lego. And then the next thing is painting Lego, and there is some amazing, really amazing artists here at the convention at BrickFair. Really amazing people that can paint Lego. This is Bill. He's got some stuff over there. What people can do with just clay and paint amazes me. Compared to printing, this is not realistic for a production type of minifigure, but this is art. These minifigures right here that you're seeing, this is art. This is not something, this is like one-of-a-kind stuff. This is why you'll never see the company I was talking about earlier, see this type of stuff, because it requires an extreme amount of time to have the patience and detail. I think a lot of these guys, what they do to paint these figures, I've seen people, they take literally sewing needles and they'll dip it in the paint and they'll slowly detail these types of these things. So literally just use a little tiny needle. That's how precision accurate they want their minifigures to be. And it really ceases to amaze me how far the community has gone. Again, like I was talking about in the beginning, 10 years ago, all those companies I talked about didn't exist. And neither did the complexity of these artist illustrations of minifigures that they're doing. So the whole community has risen up from people who are artists and people who are making production type of things. That's a really cool thing. Again, back to the painting thing, molding and clay and all that stuff, again, it's not a production type of thing. It's really a one-type type of thing. So yeah. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is a question and answer. So if any of you guys have a question, I'm totally up for it. Does anybody have any questions? What's your question?
On the new Bad Batch figures, how you got the printing on the helmet, how would you actually get it to print?
Okay, that's a good question. What he's talking about is the Bad Batch figures. It's my company Minifigures for You. I have some upcoming minifigures, and what I've done with an ultraviolet printer is I've been able to take a helmet, a clone trooper helmet, and literally put that helmet above the printer head, and it sprays the ink onto the helmet all in one batch, sprays that ink onto it, and it's able to give almost a curved pad printing-like look onto it. And a lot of customizers, a lot of printers have not been able to do that. So he's asking how was I able to do that? And to answer your question is, with that time I was talking about earlier, I spent a good year trying to figure out how these types of printers work, and I had to experiment. The basic answer to that question is literally you're just adding more ink, because think about it, if you're releasing more ink from that printer on the top, it's going to pretty much theoretically drizzle down onto the side. It's not really doing that because it's getting cured so fast, but that's how it's going. Is as long as it's being faced by the printer, no matter how far the distance is from the printer head down to your object, it can print down there because the more ink you're releasing off from that head. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Okay. Gotta get back there.
Yeah, where are we going to eat later then?
What's your question?
How many minifigures do you think you've sold since you've been selling minifigures?
Okay, that's a good question. So we asked how many minifigures have I sold since I started this whole thing 4 years ago. But again, he's talking about my minifigs for you business. It's a great question. I don't have the exact numbers, but I can tell you that it's definitely probably at least over 8,000 minifigures I've sold for 4 years, because I make about 1,000 minifigures every 3 months. So, and sometimes it'll be less. Sometimes, like during Christmas, I'll be making the most amount of figures for obvious reasons. That'll get more than 1,000 minifigures made. But yeah, it's probably about 8,000 minifigures I've made. I remember BrickFair 2013. I took, I believe it was about 1,300 minifigures I took to the convention to sell, and about at least more than half of those sold. So, yeah, it's been a lot over the last 4 years. Any other questions? What's your question?
How many figures of like a certain figure do you actually make?
Okay, so he's asking how many different types of designs and minifigures I've created. I think last time I counted, and that was a year ago, it was 75 unique minifigure designs have been printed and sold, and I think now I want to say it's about 125 different types of minifigures I've created since I started Minifigs for You. 125 unique minifigures. I'm not talking about the hundreds I made of those, but just 125 of each different types of minifigures. I was actually going to bring those, I just didn't run out of time preparing for these types of conventions. So I wanted to bring those so I could show you guys all 125 of them, because it's really cool seeing all these years of work, seeing that lined up and be like, wow, those aren't minifigures I bought from other people. Those are minifigures that me and my team created. So, it's really cool. Any other questions? What's your question, man?
What's your favorite minifigure?
That's a good question too. What's my favorite minifigure? I've asked that question. I've had somebody ask it. Well, the Bad Batch minifigures, which are minifigures I just now releasing here at BrickFair. I'm sure a lot of people don't know what they are. They're a bunch of clone troopers. It's 4 different clone troopers. They're a squad of clones from Star Wars. Those are probably my favorite, but because of those they're not released yet, I'm not going to count that. Those are probably going to be my favorite. Before that, I have to say, goodness, there's 125 minifigures, and I can't pick out a favorite. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't really have a favorite because, I don't have other than the Bad Batch, I don't really have a true favorite because I like so many of them. Delta Squad comes close. Again, another Star Wars couple minifigures I made. My Captain America Winter Soldier version was pretty cool. I know everybody liked that. I really enjoyed how that came out. So those are probably top 3, I should say. I can't say there's one particular minifigure or group of minifigures that I really like. Those are definitely the top 3 that I really like. So, any other questions from anybody? Yeah? Anybody? Just want to make sure. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you guys for being part of this. I actually recorded this for my YouTube channel, so all of you, thank you for being part of that. Really appreciate you guys listening. And so to my YouTube channel fans who've been watching, subscribe to these wonderful people who are part of the video. And also definitely check out my channel, got plenty of other videos. And that's going to be it. Thanks, guys.